Welcome to Qatsyr Harvest Part 21. This is the YAHOWAH blog. I am your host, Craig Winn. When we were last in the library studio and considering Shabuah as the next harvest, we had come across a expose that I had written to help introduce most Jews who don't know Rabbi Maimonides very well to a little bit of his history so that they might feel more comfortable questioning the edicts that this rather diabolical man has imposed upon them. It was, 2,500 years after Moshe had inscribed Yahweh's misfot, his means to exercise good judgment, that Moshe Maimonides developed his 615 misfot. He had a number of them which he said were negative misfots and a number which were positive misfots. He had misfots that can no longer be done and misfots that must be done. He had all sorts of categorizations and, of course, even misspelling, as the SHPAT in misfot was changed to a mitzvot, as if the text had a T, a Z, or a V in it, none of which were there. It is the SH sound and the PH sound that Yahweh conveyed. And the reason that Yahweh's spelling is important is because once you know that it is a mishafat, you know that it is something that we should question, that we should strive to understand, deriving all of the potential implications of Shafat, which is making good decisions, exercising sound judgment. That is what Shafat means. But all of that, of course, was hidden by Maimonides, who, rather than providing a lucid explanation, hid the truth under his miscastings. It's one of the reasons why my transliterations all the way through the translations of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms replicate the actual letters that were used to convey the message, as opposed to the corruptions that have been advanced by rabbis. But nonetheless, he came up with this 613 misfot. He claimed that the number was based upon the seeds in a pomegranate, which would have been wrong. That is not the number. Or he also claimed it was a miracle because it also happened to be the number of bones in the human body, which is also grossly inaccurate. So anyway, he has 613. Maybe he liked the number 6 and the number 13 since it was of man and one beyond the numbers that God would have used. Nonetheless, these rabbinical regulations, customs, and traditions now serve as the foundation for Judaism. Most of these were concocted by the Rambam, which is an acronym based upon Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, and then included in what's called halakha. And halakha, it's the feminine of the verb to walk. So it's turning a verb into a feminine noun. So I don't know, maybe it's the girly walk. You look at most rabbinical types and they look like they could, they're about as strong and as virile as a young girl in the 3rd grade. These things, however, have gone from a walk, which would be an interesting way to present information as to how one would convey one's life, to being known now as Jewish religious law, although they have nothing to do with the ethnicity of being Jewish and have all to do with Judaism. And Judaism and being Jewish are very different things. Most Jews, ethnically, which is a race, do not prescribe to the religion of Judaism. Judaism is a religion, being Jewish is a race. Well, this misguided rabbi claimed that these 613 regulations were all listed in the Torah, which is something also which is not true. As affirmation, he claimed that his list was, as I have shared, equal to the seeds in a pomegranate. People will go to such extremes to try to validate their presumptions. And the sad thing is, when it's shown to be untrue, no one seems to care. That's the nature of religion, isn't it? But this is true. Rabbi Maimonides was born in Cordoba, Spain. Yes, he was not in the Promised Land. In 1135 CE, which makes him a pretty distant soul to be trying to explain the Torah to Jews. Within 2 centuries of the time that the once Christian nation was conquered by the Islamic Moors. Then, following the Islamic Almohad conquest of Muslim Moorish Spain in 1148, Maimonides' father, unhappy with the Islamic ultimatum of surrender to Allah and Muhammad and become a Muslim or die, moved his family, as did most Spanish Jews, to exile in Fez, Morocco. Fez is the place where the streets ran red with Christian blood during the Islamic conquest of the 8th century, which is why that Fez cap that Muslims and Shriners wear is always a bloody red color. It was a particularly odd choice for him to have selected, since 6,000 Jews were massacred in Fez during the anti-Semitic pogrom in 1033, as various tribes tried to prove who was the best Muslim. Fez was a reenactment of what Muhammad had done in Yathrib and then in Kabar. Muslims have been about genocide for a very long time. Every Jewish man was humiliated and executed. The women were raped, and their property was confiscated. That's why when Muslims scream either genocide or occupation in Gaza or in the West Bank, I want to puke. The young Maimonides studied under Abdul Arab ibn Mushalha at the University and Mosque of Al-Qarawin, which was at the time the most influential of Islamic religious institutions. This is really hilarious because it was rabbis who, at the time of Muhammad and Yathrib, made the Quran possible by selling their Talmud stories to Muhammad. Without rabbis selling their Babylonian Talmud stories to Muhammad, the Quran wouldn't exist today. Islam wouldn't exist today. Muhammad literally based the majority of the Quran on these stories, which he then twisted to serve his agenda. And the reason the Quran turned anti-Semitic is because the rabbis had the audacity, after selling Muhammad these stories for Muhammad to pretend they came from Allah, laughed at him and mocked him, saying, obviously, these didn't come from Allah. We sold them to you. And then you twisted them such that they no longer even make any sense. Well, rabbis created Islam as a result. And now, 5 centuries thereafter, you've got the most influential of rabbis studying at an Islamic institution, the very religion that the rabbis had conceived and the very religion that is devoted to the annihilation of Jews. If you are a Jew and you trust a rabbi, you are either ignorant, immoral, or irrational. Those are the choices. It was there that this edicts that Maimonides would write were developed. It is where He pondered and pontificated upon Islam's holy books and then incorporated much of one religion into the other. And that would include Allah's deadly and demonic Quran, Ishaq's putrid Sirah, the life of Muhammad, Tabari's horrific Tariq, history of Islam, and Bukhari's disgusting hadith, oral traditions, and life and law of Muhammad and his companions, the last of which served to significantly influence Maimonides and his view of the Talmud, or Jewish oral law. Known by the Islamic name Abu Imam Musa, the name of the Quran's caricature of Moses ben Maryam ibn Abdallah, slave to Allah, the Rambam relocated to Gaza to, he could well have been in Gaza, but he actually relocated to Egypt, which at the time controlled much of Gaza, to serve Sultan Saladin. This is really a twisted story, isn't it, for the man most responsible for codifying Judaism. He was the second most acclaimed Muslim of all time and the general who led the Islamic opposition to the Crusaders. There he collaborated with the Muslim sage Averroes to promote and develop the philosophical traditions of Aristotle, who, in addition to being a philosopher and educator, was a pagan immersed in the sun god religions of ancient Greece. Consistent with the Quran, which claims to confirm that which it contradicts, and central to Maimonides' religion, the Islamic and Greek cultural advocate advanced the arrogant and irrational notion that it is impossible for the truths arrived at by human intellect to contradict those revealed by God, in spite of the fact that the foundation of his religion was little more than a contradiction of Yahweh's testimony. So he basically said, if I can think it, it can't contradict what God says. I mean, what religion does to people's minds is astounding. But nonetheless, this was the primary teacher and inspiration for Maimonides, and it's the arrogance of the rabbis as they trample all over Yahweh's Torah and prophets with their own contributions and contradictions. The Jewish religion, which had given birth to Islam in Yathrib, today's Medina, was now rooted in the religion that it had conceived. The rabbis' 14 volumes of Mishnah Torah remains canonical in its authority, especially as it codifies the Babylonian Talmud. It even served to inspire one of the most acclaimed Roman Catholic philosophers and theologian, St. Thomas Aquinas, who a century later reveled in the writings of Abu Imam Musa ben Maimun ibn Abdallah, a.k.a. the Rambam Maimonides. Stunning, isn't it? The interwoven nature of these three disgusting religions. How rabbis gave birth to Christianity through Paul to create a counterfeit of David, the actual Messiah and Son of God, only to have Akiba create another counterfeit Messiah to counter the very false Messiah, Jesus Christ, that a previous rabbi had conceived. Then, a matter of centuries later, writing their Babylonian Talmud to contradict this testimony of Yahweh with all manner of tripe, and then selling their fables, to Muhammad so that he could twist them to create the Quran, and then to have this man, Abu Imam Musa bin Maimon ibn Abdallah, aka the Rambam Maimonides, codify Judaism based upon all of the rubbish that these religions had wrought. Well, this idiot's mitzvot, like all things rabbinical, were comprised of religious regulations designed to empower the kind of people Yahweh wanted to be removed from the promised land. Citing the Rambam, rabbis claim authority for themselves, and they condemned tens of millions of Jewish souls in the process, that they would never know Yahweh. There is, of course, no record of their oral law existing prior to the emergence of the egotistical and self-serving religious caste of rabbis some 1,300 years after the Talmud, or the Torah, I should say, was meticulously transcribed and read to the people. This notion of an oral Torah comes from, guess who? This Rabbi Maimonides. And it is nothing but a counterfeit, another bit of replacement foolology, which serves as the basis of most religions. And so, like other things religious, Jewish oral law is a myth, one which no informed, rational person would possibly believe. These religious regulations would not be accurately recounted in writing until the production of the Talmud, which began circa 200 CE in maybe a little bit, say 125 CE, beginning in Jerusalem, through perhaps 200 to 25 CE, and then around 500 CE with the Babylonian Talmud, and then the Mishnah, which began around 200 CE and continued to be developed through 1180 CE, depending upon which version of these things one accepts. Well, anyway, like their present day infatuation with the Talmud, which they call a Torah, on this day, the children of Israel actually listened to Yahweh's Torah. And all of the people answered, is how the text of the actual Torah reads, in one cold voice, saying, all the words which for the benefit of the relationship Yahweh has spoken, we will act upon. Yeah, well, didn't turn out that way, did it? Now, these first Jews were particularly good about making promises to God that they would not keep for a matter of 24 hours, and then going about being rebellious and embittered against him. This was Shemoth names, Exodus 24:3. As this drama unfolds, we will discover that the children of Israel did not follow Yahweh's instructions, but instead decided to share the promised land with religious and political aficionados of every persuasion. The result of their defiance would ultimately lead to serving these false gods and thus becoming history's most infamous bad example. Fortunately, the time is upon us when Yisrael and Yehudah will once again, in one voice, all say all the words which beneficially Yahweh has spoken, we will act upon. You can mark your calendars for this. The collective roar from the surviving mortal remnant of Yehudim will resonate at sunset, 6:22 p.m. in Jerusalem at the dawn of Yom Kippurim on October 2nd, 2033, which is year 6000 Yah. But on this day, proving that what really should have been another death blow to the religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, 1,400, 1,500, 2,000, and 2,500 years before they were conceived under Paul, Akiba, Muhammad, and Maimonides, this is what Yahweh actually revealed. And Moshe wrote down every one of the words of Yahweh. Well, if Moshe wrote down, as this said, every one of the words of Yahweh, there could have been no oral Torah, could there? Because if Yahweh spoke it, it was written down. It wasn't kept in an oral memory. Under this statement, there can be no, not one, Talmud, Mishnah, Halakha, or misguided notion of an oral law or oral Torah. Moshe wrote it all. This being true, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are false, as is secular humanism. Since the Torah was accurately transcribed, the religious corruptions and counterfeits of God's foundational message to humankind cannot be trustworthy or reliable. And this is because they're all contradictory. And as such, for the sake of many, these religions should be exposed and condemned. You know, Christianity begins with Paul's 14 letters. I know you look up the Christian New Testament and you think it begins with the book of Matthew, but the book of Matthew wasn't written by a man named Matthew. It was nothing actually but a very crude job of plagiarizing three sources. There's nothing in it that was actually written by the man who claims to have been Matthew. And it was contrived right around 90 to 95 CE. Mark actually wrote immediately upon the death of Paul and at Paul's instructions, because Paul claimed that he would use them for this purpose, and therefore was written around 70 to 75 CE. Luke was Paul's propagandist and his personal healer, and he copied down much of what Mark wrote. Matthew then becomes 80% of it is a conglomeration of Mark and Luke. Neither Mark nor Luke, and of course not Matthew, were eyewitnesses. Matthew wasn't even born at the time, was generations away from the time that these events played out, and neither of the others are eyewitnesses. We don't know who wrote the book now bearing the name of John, but it would not have been a disciple named Yahuwah. And there is no evidence whatsoever that ties it to him. And it was likely written far, far away in Ephesus. So these books all followed by a considerable time the books that actually begot Christianity. Christianity was conceived with Paul's 14 letters, which were the first 14 books written that comprised the Christian New Testament if they were actually put in their correct order. I don't think Christianity would exist, because the book of Galatians was the first written, and it exists for one purpose: to replace the Torah of Yahweh with "but I, Paul, say." If you were to go second unto that, it would be to replace the Son of God and Messiah, Dode David, with a mythical misnomer named Iesu Christu. And everything in it from that point on is replacement foolology. So Christianity cannot be true, because it begins by contradicting and counterfeiting everything God said. Judaism began by trying to stave off the influence of the false Messiah, Iesu Christu, created by Paul. Shaul, the very man that Yahweh, 666 years prior to him writing his first letter in 52 CE, called him the plague of death and Chaba'uk, And Akiba, the founder of rabbinical Judaism, rather than denouncing the cult of Christianity, which was exceedingly anti-Semitic, should simply have said, no, we have absolute proof throughout the prophets that the Son of God and the Messiah, the one who came to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim, is David. The evidence is overwhelming. He wrote about it prophetically in first person. The greatest of the prophets tell us the whole story of exactly what he would do. He himself explained his timing and purpose in his message through Daniel. And of course, it is the secondary story that runs throughout the book of Isaiah. Had he said that, Christianity wouldn't have existed. There would have been no need for Judaism. And those religions not existing, there would have been no Islam, because there would have been no material to fill out the Quran. Muhammad would have simply been a sand pirate over a criminal enterprise in Arabia and not a religious figure. So a lot happened because people didn't realize that Moshe wrote down everything Yahweh said in the Torah. They didn't even realize that Yahweh was God's name, because the rabbinical types saw to it that his name would be erased from their scriptures, from the Talmud, as well as from their people's lives. And if you don't know Yahweh's name, you can't know him. There's no means to salvation. The same would be true with Islam. It would not exist, nor would Christianity, had rabbis not erased Yahweh's name. One of the great travesties of all time. Second on to it is denying the fact that David fulfilled the mikra of Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim, and that he is the Messiah and Son of God and returning King. So all of these religions somehow missed, and Moshe wrote down every one of the words of Yahweh. They are negated by a single statement. This declaration is particularly caustic to Judaism because, of course, it precludes the notion of an oral law. Since Moshe wrote down everything Yahweh said, Judaism's foundation, it's claimed that 70 elders received a second oral law at the same time from God crumbles. Further, if these words cannot be trusted, if Moshe didn't accomplish what Yahweh said he did, then Judaism cannot be relied upon, because it would then have drawn its authority from twisting the words of an unreliable God and an errant text. This revelation is especially scathing to Christianity. And that is because it means that their religion's festivals, its symbols, its teachings are all wrong. And they are all in conflict with the testimony of God as transcribed by Moshe. Mutually exclusive and diametrically opposing concepts such as massive discrepancies which exist between the Torah and the church cannot both be right. It's just not the least bit possible, since Paul's letters are diametrically opposed to the Torah. Since these things are completely different, they both cannot be true. Sorry. And when you think of the proposition of Christianity, it's that a man who had been trained as a rabbi, and if he hadn't had that training, he never could have written his 14 letters, particularly Galatians, which attacked the Torah. He wouldn't have known it well enough to have attacked it the way that he did. But if you look at Paul's proposition, which is that he is a rabbi who was, by his own admission, out murdering those who were influenced by this new religion. that he was authorized by God to contradict everything that God said. How is that even remotely possible? That according to Paul, that the testimony of the God who inspired him was incapable of saving anyone. And so God just gave up and said, I can't figure this thing out. I want this guy who has been murderous, who by his own admission was a sexual pervert as well, an egomaniac who admitted that he was demon-possessed, that's the guy that I want being my lone messenger to the world, because I can't figure it out, and obviously he's better at it than me. That's your proposition, Christians. It doesn't get any more complicated than that. And if you want to pretend that that's not true, then you're just kidding yourself. Because that is the irrational conundrum of the Christian New Testament. Mutually exclusive, diametrically opposing concepts cannot both be true. And you're dealing with now the creation of a church which has no basis in the Torah and prophets. And these, in the conflict between the invitations to be called out and meet, along with the Shabat from God, and the Christian inventions of, well, they weren't really inventions, they were borrowed from the Babylonians, of Christmas, Easter, and Sunday worship. They're diametrically opposed. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm not sorry. I'm disgusted. Now, this statement is overwhelmingly critical of Islam, because Allah claims that his Quran confirms the Torah, when in actuality, the Quran is the antithesis of Yahweh's word. I didn't write 4,200 pages in goddamn religion for my jollies. Huge part of the reason I was asked to write it is because Allah derives all of his credibility by claiming to have been the God who inspired the Torah and the prophets, and thus had a relationship with Adam and Noah and Abraham, and on it goes through Moshe and Aaron and Dode and Solomon, even the mythical Isus, when in fact everything he had to say was stupid. Allah is so dumb, and Muhammad wasn't any better because he was illiterate, that their claims regarding the characters of the Torah and prophets are so out of kilter with reality, and even internally conflicting, because some stories, like the stories of Adam, are retold 35, 40 times in the Quran. They're never at the beginning, which is the only place the story belongs. And every time it's retold differently. The same thing is the story of Noah, which again isn't at the beginning and is different every time that Allah tries to retell this story. It's like he had Parkinson's or some form of amnesia, or he was suffering from dementia, mental illness. And I'm sorry, but that just is the reality of it, is that the Quran all the way through, beginning to end, is the antithesis of the Torah. Muhammad and Allah were in opposition to all 10 statements that Yah etched in stone. And of course, they fail every test of a prophet as laid out in Dabadim 18. It's an absolute joke. Clearly, for anyone who is a functioning brain, recognizes that the Quran is the worst book ever plagiarized. And it's not even plagiarized well, because it is so badly twisted and perverted after plagiarizing it such that nothing makes any sense. Therefore, since the Torah is reliable and Moshe did what it says he did, then Muhammad and his Quranic recitals are pure rubbish. Its diatribe consistently contradicts that which it claims to affirm. And even if the Torah were false, then all his claims, as so are all his claims, because he claims to have revealed it. But you get to the realization that the rabbis demonstrated that the Quran was the antithesis of the Torah and did not confirm it. So Allah has a conniption fit and said, that's only because you rabbis and Yathrib changed it. And, I mean, to believe that, again, you have to be a complete ignoramus. The rabbis and Yathrib weren't in a position to change the Torah, and the Torah as it was provided and available to them is a very good match as we look at the Masoretic text, and its derivation over time is an exceedingly good match for the original Torah as memorialized through the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the moment the Dead Sea Scrolls were unearthed, as well as the many, many thousands of manuscripts of the Torah all around the world at this time that are all in agreement with one another and in total wholesale disagreement with the Quran, it proves, in fact, that Allah lied when he says that the Torah was changed by these Jews to falsify the Quran's claim that it and the Torah were the same. To be religious, I mean, I don't care if it's Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. You genuinely have to be stupid. I know that sounds like a pejorative, but you either have to be completely irrational or completely ignorant, so that you don't know that your religion is false just because you're ignorant, you're unaware of the facts. Or you're irrational. You know the facts, but you can't think your way through them. Or you just don't give a crap. That your faith is all that matters to you, and you're just going to parrot your faith again and attack and condemn anyone bringing a message that is contrary to it because you just don't like it. And that is the primary approach, that the ad hominem argument will just attack the person, since we don't want to deal with their message, because quite frankly, we can't deal with their message because we don't have a leg to stand on. Religion has been the greatest curse of humanity from the very beginning, and it doesn't matter which religion we're talking about. They're all disgusting, but the worst of them, by far, are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, because they all piled their crap right on top of the Torah and prophets, so that they hid the truth from billions of people. And that's why God despises them. The fourth declaration of the 24th chapter of Shemot goes on to describe an altar that Moses constructed at the base of Mount Horeb. It was replete with 12 columns for the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, I mention this because if you search for Jabal al-Lutz or Jabal Makla in Saudi Arabia on Google Maps, you will see the remains of the golden calf altar, as well as the burned summit of the mountain, even the rock at Rephidim form, which the water flowed forth. In your search, however, be aware that Jabal Makla, the burnt mountain, is actually distinguished from Jabal al-Lutz by the presence of a dark-colored hornfels derived from metamorphosized rocks. These arise from the transformation of existing rock, which was granite in this case, through metamorphism when subjected to temperatures at 200 degrees Celsius at elevated pressures of 100 megapascals or greater. During this process, the rock, while remaining mostly in a solid state, recrystallizes, causing physical and chemical changes while emerging as a different composition. The coordinates of for Mount Jabal Makla. It's 23 degrees 35 minutes, 48.27 seconds north, 35 degrees 20 minutes, 7.77 seconds east for the Split Rock. And you can look these up. It's you'll find them in the Qatsyr Harvest volume 5 of the Yada Yahowah series, if you'd like the rest of this, including the longitude and latitude of the golden calf altar and the altar for the sacrifice. Also, so long as you put your sneakers or your speakers on mute and do not listen to the Christian mumbo jumbo, there are CGI and drone videos which present the path from the Red Sea to Choreb. They're also listed. I think I have 3 of them listed on the website, yadayah.com. Returning to the text of the Torah, we read, getting an early start in the morning to encourage being perceptive, considering the information to respond appropriately. He built an altar at the base of the mountain, along with 12 standing stones for the 12 branches, Shabat, tribes or divisions of Yisrael. This was the most important event in the history of the planet, perhaps the universe, and Moshe recognized that this meeting with God liberating his people from human religious and political oppression and bringing them toward the promised land and then revealing his instructions to them was a monumentous event, and that he needed to memorialize this occurrence for all time. And he did so correctly, building something designed to display the restorative properties of the relationship, particularly as it would play out among the branches of Yisrael. Then he sent out the youth of the children of Yisrael to lift up that which elevates by way of a sacrificial offering prepared for a feast, for reconciliation and for fellowship, shalom, to approach Yahweh and thrive, living an abundant life. The last word, I'm laughing here because the last word here is par, bull. So it is a bull that is it is being offered, and par and para also speak of that which is fruitful and productive, and ultimately the wayward nature of the mortal remnant of the children of Israel are going to be resolved this way with the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, which is derived from the same Hebrew term, par. And it is the way to reconcile the relationship so that the children of Israel can be in Yahweh's presence. As Yahweh approaches, they would be incinerated without this protection. They need to be prepared in advance. And that's precisely what's going to happen on Towrah in year 6000 Yah.
No bull.
No bull, the producer says. Without bull in this case, there is no resolution. The elders, of course, were off on their own, conspiring against Yahweh and creating their own religious pronouncements. So Moshe bypassed them and solicited the youth of Israel, the opposite of the elders in this case. This would be their opportunity to rise and shine. The future generation lifted up that which elevates, capitalizing upon the opportunity to ascend. They were prepared to reconcile their relationship and establish a fellowship with Yahweh. In the process, God honored his promise to Abraham to restore the relationship. And as a result of the Torah, the sacrifice, and the attitude of the young given at this time, the chosen people would thrive once again with the sacrifice of a parah, and later a parah, a par, and then a parah. At this seminal moment in the redemption of humankind, Yahweh asked Moshe to read the book he had provided. In so doing, he disclosed the ultimate truth. The Torah and the covenant are one. The Torah was revealed so that we could be part of God's covenant family. The text, and this is from Shemot Exodus 24:7. It reads, he grasped hold, Lakash, of the written communication, Shafar, the inscribed documentation, regarding Habareth, the covenant, this family-oriented relationship agreement. And he read it out loud, offering an invitation to meet in a hearing ozone for the Am family. Then they said everything which to reveal the proper path to walk, to receive the benefits of the relationship. Yahweh has spoken. We have listened to. Shema. And we will act upon. Asha. Shemot names Exodus 24:7, as I have mentioned. Therefore, there was something extraordinary afoot. For the first time ever, there was now a written document between God and humankind. A book. And Moshe was able to grasp hold of it. You know, when we study this notion of Christianity and think that it goes back to this mythical misnomer, Jesus Christ, I don't think, some billions of people believe, there was no book. Iesu Christou, well, it was a myth, so myths typically don't have opposing thumbs and fingers. But nonetheless, even in his mythological form, he wrote nothing. So contrary to the God of the Torah and prophets, there was no book. In fact, there wouldn't be a book for, well, I guess the book was first put together right around 450 CE, over 4 centuries later. Yeah, what you had within 2 decades of this event was the first of 14 letters from Paul, but he was a demon-possessed liar, so that doesn't bear well, and all they were was letters. Grumpy letters at that. Was no book. You look at Muhammad and his claim as the godfather of this criminal enterprise and murderous sand pirate, that he had a book. Oh, wow, the Quran's a book from Allah. Or wow. Guess what? Not a word. Not a letter. Nothing. Not during Muhammad's entire life. Not for generations afterward would there be a book. When the book finally emerged, it was an absolute unmitigated mess. Jumbled, contradictory, scientifically and historically inaccurate, and grotesquely immoral. No book. Judaism claims, well, they had a book. It was an oral book, but it was a book going all the way back to this time, and yet the first evidence of it isn't for, well, over 1,000 years later. There's no book of Judaism until Rabbi Akiba starts writing and his companions start writing the Jerusalem Talmud, is really the first book of Judaism, if you will. And you know, It advocates a false Messiah that brought the wrath of Rome on the province of Judea, caused the diaspora, leading to the Holocaust. That's the founder of your religion? Really, it wasn't a book to codify Judaism until the Babylonian Talmud, and it's Babylonian. These religions, no book. But this relationship with Yahweh, the covenant relationship, it began with a book. And that book has been meticulously maintained. And that book is affirmed through this silver scroll that actually dates to this period, to 1400 BCE, in the location where the children of Israel entered the promised land. And there are stones and artifacts affirming the Torah going all the way back to that time. It began as a book. Yahweh wanted his people to know what he had conveyed to them. And what's interesting is that the book of the Torah at this point, as we're dealing with this now second iteration of it, Shemot names, Exodus wasn't actually part of the book. No, Exodus was an experience. The book was comprised of Bereshith in the beginning, Genesis. The book was about creation, how and why and when Yahweh created the universe. It was about the experience in Gan Eden, which is so essential to us understanding what God is offering us and where we're headed if we want to have a relationship with him. The book included the story of the regional flood and how it was begun and where it occurred, and why Noah was chosen. The book tells us the story of Babel and why we should disassociate from Babel because of its confounding confusion and intermixing and commingling of truth and lies, religion and politics. The book was mostly about, and the central core of the book was devoted to the very thing that is listed here: written communication regarding the Bereth covenant. The narrative of the covenant is presented in Bereshith. It begins early and it continues throughout that book, where Yahweh, in his narrative, explains the 5 conditions and 5 benefits of the covenant with Abraham and how that would continue through Yishak and then Jacob and through Jacob's children, even though most of these individuals were not of the greatest character. And they became symbolic of what Israel would become. But the covenant is Yahweh's. It is perfect. It is God's family. He is offering it to us, and this book exists to present it. That's why it was written. And so Moshe could grasp hold of Bereshith, and he could read the written communication regarding the covenant, because that is what God dictated to him that he wrote down. From that point on, Exodus is the experience of Yahweh introducing himself to Moshe, explaining the nature of his name to Moshe, even how to pronounce his name to Moshe, that Yahweh is his one and only name. Rather important beginning, don't you think? And then it explains why Yahweh chose Moshe to represent him, and the mindset and the approach that Yahweh would use from that point on, always to find the right person that suits the particular mission that he has in mind and that he's going to work through an individual. In this case, an 80-year-old shepherd with a speech impediment. Perfect. And from that point on, the children of Israel would live this experience. And they wrote down, Moshe wrote down exactly what they had experienced. The good, the bad, and the ugly, although it was very little good other than what Yahweh had to say. The bad and the ugly represents the Jewish response to God and their propensity to be religious in direct conflict with the covenant. So he grasped hold, he lakash. He received and accepted, taking, called, imperfect, actually, literally, consistently obtaining, the written communication, shafir, the inscribed documentation, the printed scroll, with accurate and exacting physically recorded inscriptions on it regarding the ha-bereth, the family-oriented covenant relationship based upon mutual trust, binding oaths and promises, the alliance of it, and it is based upon be'eth, which is family, home, and household. It is always singular and absolute. And he kara, he read it out loud to them. Kara, just like every word of this is a treasure. This is as it's like opening the treasure chest of Yahweh and finding the crown jewels inside. And so you find lakash, the fact that we can grasp hold of Yahweh's hand and he can lift us up, and we can with our hands grasp hold of this written communication, shafar, that Yahweh has provided us to document the nature of the bereth, covenant relationship that he conceived through Abraham and Sarah. And then he kara. Kara is the basis of the 7 Moed Mikre, where we are given the opportunity to walk to God. And where at Pesach, the door to life is open for us. At Matzah, we are perfected so that we might enter Yahweh's presence as his children on Bikurim, being enriched and empowered such that on Shabuah, we can have a doubling and of the tenfold enrichment and empowerment that enables us to be transitioned from mortal to immortal beings in this upcoming harvest. And that is followed by the end of Jacob's troubles with Teruah and the aforementioned sacrifice of the Adamah Parah. 10 days later, Yahweh and Dod, the Son of God and Messiah, our Savior, return on Yom Kippurim so that we can return to the garden on Sukkah and camp out with Yahweh. That is the story of the Mikra, which are based upon Kara, which means to read, to recite, to offer an invitation to meet, to be summoned, to be welcomed, and to be greeted. All of these things are conveyed by Kara in a hearing in the ear for the family, for the people. And they said, Amar, everything, Kol, all of this, which to reveal the path to walk, to receive the benefits of the relationship, Asher, Yahweh, a proper transliteration of Elohah, God, as directed by his Torah teaching regarding his Haya existence, has spoken, Dabar, has provided and communicated in words. And we have Shama. We have listened. We have heard. And so we will asah. We will engage. We will acknowledge. We will profit from. We will celebrate. We will act upon this. It is one of the most profoundly important statements ever written, ever spoken, with literally the treasure trove of words that introduce us to the creator God of the universe and tell us how we can form a relationship with him. Well, this is the first mention of a scroll that would comprise the Torah, and it is presented as the written documentation of the Bereth covenant. To benefit from this relationship and to become part of Yahweh's family, we must do as they did, accept Yahweh's written communication, read it, recite the words of the Torah, listen to God, and then act upon what he has shared with us. Yahweh's revelation has been meticulously recorded and maintained so that we might come to know him, understand what he is offering and expecting in return, thereby enabling us to trust and rely upon his provision. And it was kara, which was translated in that text as read it out loud, offering an invitation to meet. That is the verb that lies at the very heart of Mikra. Its primary definition is to call out, inviting and summoning us into God's presence, welcoming us such that we can meet with Yahweh. And of course, it also means to read and recite, to announce and to proclaim. Collectively, these ideas define the very purpose of the Torah and of the covenant, as well as the Moed Mikra, upon which the verb serves as its actionable root. Yahweh is not only calling us to him, but he is also calling us out of this world and to his set-apart realm. He is inviting us into his family. And the answer that we are asked to provide to him is by walking along the 7-step path that he has provided home. The Torah is the way, the covenant is the result, the Mikra is the path. So in this passage, Yahweh documented an additional clause in the Yisrael response. They would not only engage and act upon what God had prescribed and what they had heard and thus observed throughout the Torah and attend to his Mikra, they promised to listen to what Yahweh had to say, striving to comprehend and understand his teaching so that they would be able to benefit from his instructions. It is what we all should be doing. So this is a wonderful place for us to conclude this hour of the Yahowah blog. And conclude it with one of the most profoundly important statements to ever come forth from Yahweh, the creator God of the universe, to his people regarding his Torah and his Bereth family relationship, as it is provided to those who walk along the path of the Moed Mikra. I thank you for listening, for inviting me into your homes, and for sharing this time of your lives. This has been the Yahowah blog, and I am your host, Craig Winn.